interesting background than I do, that's for sure.
Yeah, so we were talking about Singapore. So Felix, you are Singaporean originally, or you came there from somewhere else like everybody, or like many people in Singapore?
I mean, if you're asking about my grandparents, I'm pretty sure they came from China.
But you are born in Singapore and spent most of your life there?
Yes, I did. Yes, I am. I was born here and spent most of my life here. Yes.
Cool. Well, let's talk about your company. So I put here this exclamation mark because you have the coolest company name. The company name,
I do.
exclamation mark in the middle of the name. It's even better than Yahoo, because Yahoo has an exclamation mark at the end and you put it right in the middle. So it's a very catchy name, Get Out Events. No, Get Out Events, right? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
So
it is, yeah.
Obviously,
it's quite funny, when we try and call the HR director and we get to a gatekeeper and she asks, where are you calling from? And we say, get out. And she thought that we were trying to be rude on the phone.
You have to be careful with that. So, and I wonder when you pronounce the name, so am I supposed to shout in the middle of the sentence? I mean, of the name, or what's the proper way to say? Just say Get Out Events, or do you say like Get Out Events, or what's the proper way to say it?
It's Chinese New Year. Do whatever makes you feel good. But if you don't want to sound too spectacular, feel free to just say Get Out Events.
Well, but the company is special in two respects. One, my understanding is that your company will be helping us with the symposium in Singapore in the summer. And so that's obviously, a very strong connection. So thank you so much for your support and involvement. But two, also, not only it's a first-time participant in XCulture, but also it's an industry that before didn't participate. We've had, a dozen companies from the food industry, probably a dozen from the clothing, like the usual suspects, some IT companies. Here we have a company that specializes essentially in event management, right? Event organization. And so no matter what industry you guys, students, when you graduate, you will be working in, you probably will have to, organize some events around your business, maybe some sort of presentations, maybe some sort of get out events for your employees, maybe some sort of promotional events. And so probably companies like Get Out Events will be helping you. So it's a very good time now to learn how they work, what they do, how they operate, and maybe even come up with some ideas for how they can do it better. So you can probably understand the concept, but not being sort of deeply familiar with the industry. Maybe you'll even bring some fresh perspective, and maybe even you will recommend something to the company. And so what I suggest we do is we start with a little introduction. So Felix and maybe Gordon, if needed, talk a little bit about the company sort of history, product, some basic things. During that time, students, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. And as always, you can ask them two different ways. One, you can type your questions in the Q&A window and we will read them and answer them. Or better yet, if you have a good question, just raise your hand and we will add you to the panel here and you can talk to the presenters. So you have this button at the bottom of the screen that looks like a raised hand. If you press it, we will see your raised hand and we will just add you to the panel and you can talk directly to the company representative here. So Felix, if you can maybe tell us a little bit about sort of, the basic background on the company, what you do, how you do it, where you came from, and what you're trying to accomplish. And then we'll move on to the interview style.
Sure, okay. Thanks, Vas. Yeah, so by way of background, I was personally trained in finance and investments in the past, so I was never doing events for a very long time. But after 4 years in Dubai, that was sort of like my last stint in the world of financial institutions. Then I moved back to Singapore in 2012 and I started this corporate events company. So we've been around for just over 8 years now, and we've run over 2,000 events. So the events industry is a very large industry.
Did you say 2,000? Did you say
2012?
You organized? Oh, that was the year? Or
2,000 events. Yeah. We've organized more than 2,000. Yeah, we have. Yeah. So to be fair, a small team building event that is, let's say 15, 20 people is considered as one event. The video that you see behind us was a family day and a party that we did for Accenture. That was for about 3,000 people. So that's also counted as one event. Yeah. So 2,000 events includes the larger ones as well as the smaller ones. But I think what's most important. So I think what's most important for the students to know is that, especially if they have no experience in the world of event management, is that the world of event management is very broad. There are different types of events. So obviously, there are conferences, there are road shows, there are corporate events that we organize. Of course, there are personal events such as birthday parties and weddings and all that. We do not organize any personal events. So we don't do weddings, we don't do birthday parties, we don't do all those private, personal type of events. We also, at this moment, we do not participate in roadshows. We do not organize conferences. As of now, for the last 8 years, we have been focused on corporate events. So these are internal corporate events. So for example, again, team building is something that companies, large and small companies, need to organize on a very regular basis. So that's sort of our bread and butter for a long time now. And that's also what we are doing for the symposium, a very large mass team building event for the participants of the symposium later this year. The larger events that we organize are our family day events, like the one in the video that you see behind. So this happens when companies want to celebrate some sort of achievements with their staff and their staff families. They bring them together to a place. For this specific example, we did it at Resorts World in Sentosa. They spent a lot of money. They put a lot of things together. There are a lot of moving parts. And the main goal is to, again, celebrate with the staff and their family members. Another type of large event that we organize are gala dinners. In Singapore, and the Asian culture, we call them dinner and dance. Again, there's a little bit of discrepancy between how we organize a gala dinner in Asia or in Singapore versus how they do it in the West, or how you do it in the West. Gala dinners literally are very high-end. They are very black tie. They are very evening gownish when you do that in the West, or even in the Middle East, especially in Dubai. In Singapore, in Asia, there is a lot of fun. There's a lot of games. It's highly interactive. You need to engage different types of talents, different types of MCs and hosts on stage. So there is a very distinctive difference in terms of culture also in how we organize these type of events, which is why I think it's important for your students to firstly know the type of events that we organize, being corporate events firstly. Yeah, so don't think so widely to say, oh, we're going to do like a huge road show, or we're going to organize a music festival. We may do that in the future, and that may be part of their submission. But to be fair, it's going to be quite a difficult one to sort of review, simply because we haven't done a lot of that, if any, as of today. I think focusing on corporate events, focusing on employee engagement, focusing on employee rewarding, focusing on employee interaction, and these type of events is what we really specialize in, and we intend to grow this regionally, if not internationally, hopefully with the help of your students as well. So I hope that sort of answers most of the introductory questions.
Yeah, a few questions. So one, as I understand, the events you organize are primarily for corporate clients, essentially, right? So like for businesses. Yeah. And then are they aimed at providing sort of fun, more like appreciation of the employees, or there is also some component of, let's call it training? You mentioned team building. So are you taking it any further where you sort of weave in some psychology and maybe HR and some business into it, or it's all about just having fun and bag races and just listening to music?
Yeah, so there are for family days and dinner and dance events, they are primarily focused on employee rewards. The companies organize them. It's sort of like a very large get together for their staff and maybe their family members for family days. So that's quite straightforward. There is very little to no training involved for those two types of events. For team building, we started off in the past trying to promote very high level training alongside team building activities and programs designed around those. For example, we would put them through maybe a DISC test. We work with consultants and then bring them through all that and organize a game to sort of end the session or end the day. We found that it's very difficult to sell something so highly intellectual when we first get our foot into the door of a new client, especially into a new country. In our last 8 years now, we've realized that it's actually very easy to sell, or much easier to sell the concept of fun So whenever we approach a new prospect or we try and approach a new market, we promote fun first that is organized in a very systematic way. So for example, we have whenever we start a team building program, we have an introductory speech from the CEO or from the MD, and then we organize an icebreaker that lasts for about 10-15 minutes to sort of get everyone to know each other in a very short amount of time. We then split them into teams, so it's a very systematic process that we follow. But the overall wrapper for these team building events that we organize is really fun. When we pitch our services, we pitch the concept of fun. When we organize it and we run it, it's really the experience that we try and sell. We try and make it very interactive. We try and make it very engaging, and obviously to make it very more fun. Sometimes we do get requests from clients to say, look, could you maybe organize something for our senior management team and sort of make it a lot more intellectual, because yeah, right, exactly. So the short answer that we give today is no. Of course, we don't have anybody in-house with that skill set. I've personally not been very active in searching for such kind of partnerships externally, although there are a lot of emails that's been coming into my inbox to say, you know, Felix, could we partner on this? They are an expert in the art and science of presentation, for example. These are potential partnerships that we can explore. But you know, again, at this time, that's not really something that we would really be focusing on right now, because I don't think that is our key selling point. I don't think we have a USP on that on that note. But in terms of fun, in terms of organized fun, in terms of creating new ideas and new programs for staff to come together and bond and build cohesion and improve communication, things like that is something that we've been doing for a long time.
So about the size and the age of the company, so you said you've organized over 2,000 events. That sounds like it's a huge number. I mean, even if you do one a day, that's, you know. So how old is the company? How many people work for you? And what's the dynamics? Have you always been this size, or have you been growing? Tell us a little bit more.
No. So it's been really tough. We've rebranded the company once in 2015, 2016. When I first started, I've had other partners in the business, in the previous business, but I was always the active. Basically active partner managing this. At our peak, we employed 25 full-time staff on our payroll, and there were a lot of lessons that we've learned, you know, over the last couple of days, as they say, a couple of years, as they say. You really need to get into business itself to really learn what running a business is really like. So we've grown to that kind of size where we have 25, 26 full-time employees. We've shrank to 3 or 4 full-time employees. Today, we are, I think, 13 or 14 full-timers on board. But we have learned to be very optimized in our processes, both in our marketing, in our sales, and our operations processes. So the last couple of years, I focused a lot on building SOPs, systems, operations, and processes to sort of run the business, not necessarily without me, but for the main purposes of not having to hire 3 times, 4 times the number of people on the payroll in order to keep this business growing. We've also moved on to use a lot of part-timers, so a lot of event-based staff we use. So these people are usually paid based on an hourly wage, and we've also built a large database in Singapore of about 530 part-timers who have got experience in events. So we've learned that, you know, in order to sort of get a foothold in a country or in a city, we first obviously need to be able to build a database of workers, of staff, of event crew, of part-timers. I think we've done quite well in Singapore, which means if we were to run an event for 5,000 employees of Accenture, we would probably need to hire 50 part-time staff for the event, 50. And a lot of times you try and hire that 50, and there's some people who don't turn up, and then there's some attrition. So we tend to hire 20% more, so about 60 people we hire and we commit to. and it's not very easy to be able to hunt for 60 part-time staff who's, number one, willing to work at the wage that we were willing to pay them, and at that time, at that date, at that venue, and with the experience that we need. So, for example, sometimes we hire staff to manage carnival game store. Sometimes we need stagehands, so you need a little bit of technical experience as stagehands. So there are a lot of job roles that goes into putting an event the scale for the scale that we organize. Before, one of the biggest challenge was we were quite indecisive. Should we hire all these roles in-house and put them on our payroll and then take on a lot of risk on our P&L, on our balance sheet, or do we try and sort of create a system which allows us to then work with freelancers, work with part-timers, and we've chose the latter, and that's done us very, very well in the last few years.
Gives you more flexibility.
If I could interject, Vas, you know, so I've lived all around Asia and been involved in a lot of corporate events. The challenge all the time with corporate events is the people in the market when you're searching for someone. It's really a wild card, a crapshoot on are they going to deliver or not? People come and go constantly. What's the product going to look like? So for an HR person, there's a lot of risk. And what I saw with Felix and Get Out was, you know, his vision is around how to productize this. And I think the experimentation about how do we manage the fixed versus the variable cost. So he has the core, the brain thrust on how to organize events, but the people that execute them, I was seeing an app the other day where he was basically giving experience points, and it's all online and the developing apps so that they could execute easily. Now, so in Asia, number one, Singapore, just so the students want to realize that Singapore is known for being able to organize things. It has a good brand, so that helps. And then if you put an overlay on top of that, and I know the challenge is about getting in other markets. You know, there's some you know, country-specific advantages or core competencies of Felix and the Singapore almost combined that should be allow them to create basically a new vision, a new model for event management. So that was all my only plug for him. It was a bit strategic why I picked him, you know.
Makes perfect sense. And so going back to the comments that you just made, there is a question from Maya Goldstein or Goldstein, I'm not sure how to pronounce the last name, but related to the previous comments you made, sort of your HR practices. So you hire some temp staff for some events. I assume you also contract some services like catering, maybe like, I don't know, what, food and music. So what are the things that your company does? What are the things that your 12, 15 people do? And what are the things that you contract or outsource to others?
Okay, yeah, so I was reading Maya's question as well. Do we use any agencies to hire our staff for events? Perhaps I could answer this question first.
For the subcontracting.
Yeah. So the answer is no. We don't do that, and the reason is because well, there are two reasons. One is a more an economical reason. If we use an agency, obviously the agency either pays the staff less than we offer. For example, if we were to offer $12 an hour for an event staff to work for our event, if we hired them through an agency, the agency would maybe pay them $9, $8 an hour in order to make a spread in between. We've realized that this causes a lot of a very high attrition rate, because we need to understand in this industry, the event staff or the agency, the event staff, the part-time event staff knows that there is demand for what they are willing to do. They know that there are many events being organized in Singapore, whether they are conferences or family days or dinner and dance events or team building. They know there is a demand, especially if they are reasonably responsible in their job. So there is there's a lot of price elasticity. If we offer $2 more an hour, we'll get 10 more people who's willing to work for us. So if we use agencies, if we worked with agencies and agencies take a cut, whatever's left for the event staff will be too little for them to sort of be reliable and to be committed to our event. And the last thing we want is to turn up at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. on the day of our client's event and only to realize that there's 20 people who didn't turn up. So that's one reason why we don't work with agencies to get staff. Second reason is a little bit more strategic, and Gordon did put in a small little plug for us. We've started developing our own event crew database or event crew app. So effectively, what we've developed is I can very briefly just sort of show you on the screen. Okay, so you can't see, but we've developed an app, a mobile app, where anybody who wants to work, who wants to get an event job, all they need to do is simply download this app, and whenever any event company who's on our platform has an event and they're looking to hire people for their events, they then get listed on this platform. The staff the event crew can simply apply for whichever one they want to work for. And this is already in beta stage right now. We're planning to launch it just after Chinese New Year. The reason why we've invested so much resources in building our own database and our own proprietary job platform is because we can then manage the quality of people. At the end of every event, we rate the event staff. The event staff also rates our project managers. So I would be able to see how well our project managers have been doing, because we do run many events simultaneously. It is impossible for me to be at every event at the same time, obviously. So I need to actually depend, and I like to depend on the feedback that I get from people on the ground, the guys who earns $10, $12, $15 an hour from our company. If they come up to me and say, Felix, your project manager did a really good job today. She was on time. She paid us on time. She did everything well. I know as a company, we've sort of built something that's worth growing. At the same time, I also sometimes get negative feedback from the people who get paid $10 an hour from us. They say, look, Felix, you just haven't allocated enough cups for beer today, for example. Then I know that operationally there is a problem. That helps me sort of go in to solve the problem. If we work with agencies, we do not have this level of communication with our staff. And without this level of communication, we lose a lot of control. We have no idea what's happening on the ground. We will not be able to grow the business. And that's why we don't work with agencies.
Now we have more questions, and I tried to add the students here to the panel. Julia, and the other name, I really want to know what it's pronounced, how to pronounce it correctly. If you guys want to ask your questions, unmute your microphones, but it seems to me, and go ahead and ask them, but we do have a bunch of questions about geography. So Julia, and I wish I knew how to pronounce this name. Can you hear us? Can you talk? So low cake?
Case.
Okay, all right, thank you. Do you want to go ahead, ask your question? Since your microphone works and you have a good question, go ahead, please.
Also, oh my God, this is the nickel.
All right.
Yeah, okay. I was just wondering, where do you want to expand immediately after Singapore?
So geography, yes. Very good question.
Yeah, geography. Yeah, so that is a good question. Before we've come on to the X-Culture platform, we already have a few countries in mind in Asia. We were putting plans together to expand to the Philippines. We are also currently putting plans to expand to Taiwan. Within Asia, we also have plans to expand to the Middle East, primarily to the UAE via Dubai and Abu Dhabi. So those are the three main cities / countries we are looking at to expand. Of course, with the input from students on the X-Culture program, I think we would be quite interested to see if there are other countries that we should consider first over what we initially decided to do on our own.
Yeah, so I just want to put in the plug there to ensure that students aren't biased by your initial tendency. Yeah. Students are welcome to basically validate that or suggest alternatives that make more sense. So it should be an open canvas, but the key message is that Felix has already started exploring internationally. So they have the financial foundation to do that, the capability. So what the students recommend will actually probably get implemented, depending on how thorough their research and recommendations are.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. We have a few questions about competition. So you mentioned the geography. Are there any other companies in this region that do the same or offer the same services? And if so, how do you differentiate yourself?
I thought that was part of the questions that the students had to answer in the document.
Well, obviously they will do their own research, and in many cases,
Sure.
again, your industry is very tricky. So is it entertainment? Is it business? Is it HR? So you sort of never know. So it's even not clear, you know, who your competitors are. Are this, you know, are they movie theaters and theme parks, or are they training companies or something else? But in your perspective, you know, other companies that offer something exactly the same, or whom would you consider your competition?
Yeah, okay. I think maybe an easier way to answer this question is how do we consider, what do we consider first when we try and explore expanding to a new city or a new country? I think the first thing that we would explore is if there is sufficient companies or corporates or companies based there that, you know, hires, let's say, at least 500 to 1,000 people. That's where we would tend to start, because we are a people's business. We offer event services to people. We need to go to a place where there are more people. For example, we would consider a city in Malaysia like Penang, because right now, if you just do very arm's length research, you see a lot of foreign companies, especially technology companies, technology hardware companies, opening up their factories and offices in Penang, in Malaysia. Obviously they hire a lot of people. They on average probably hire about 1,500 staff. So that at least meets the criteria, and then there's a lot of them there. So that's one, at least the first step. Yeah, if there are enough companies there. The second thing that we will look at is, do these companies have a habit of spending money on employee events, whether they are small team building events or they are simply, say in Taiwan, you know, just year-end dinners, very elaborate year-end dinners, but nothing more than just dinners. So they book out an entire restaurant or an expo hall, and they put them in there and they have fun. That's it. So is there a culture of bosses in those countries doing these things? If there is, then it's a pretty nice opportunity to explore and dig in more. So to answer your question about competitors, well, you know, it really depends. So we're very focused on only corporate events. So let's say for team building, who are our potential competitors? Are theme parks our competitors? Yes, they could potentially be. Movie theaters could also potentially be our competitors. But interestingly, in the last couple of months, especially in the second half of 2019, we've had the biggest and probably the only theme park in Singapore, the Universal Studios, that's owned by Resorts World in Singapore, come to us, and we're now sort of discussing a potential partnership for us to create customized programs within their theme parks in order to offer to our clients and to their clients. So just remember this, right? Theme parks, movie theaters, these places have hardware. They've got no software or very little software. Their staff, their employees are trained to operate the theme park. They are not trained to create team building programs. They are not trained to offer cohesion activities for their customers. They are trained to operate the hardware that they are hired within. So even our competitors, such as theme parks and I don't know, racetracks, these people would still be very happy to work with companies like ours. If we would, you know, dedicate and invest some time and resources to help them develop some kind of custom programs for their park or for their attraction, as we call it in Singapore. For the other type of event companies, I guess, you know, if you've been in the events business long enough, you would probably know that anyone who does events, whether they are in the West or in the East, if you ask them, do you organize this type of events, whatever that X or that this is, the answer is almost always yes. An event organizer or an event professional will always say, yes, I do that. So who could potentially be our competitor in let's say in Taiwan? Every single event company is our competitor. A recent fresh graduate from Taipei University who sort of wants to run some team building games could also be our competitor. In Canada, there is a scavenger hunt app called Goose Chase. They're nothing more than an app. They are also our competitor because they enable our clients to organize their own team building event without us, without any influence from us. Yeah, so an app company could also be our competitor. Whilst I think it is important to sort of do a little bit of SWOT analysis on your competitors. I've not run this business. I've not grown this business by constantly looking in the rear view mirror or looking on the side and seeing, you know, what the competitor's doing, who's doing what. I think the best way and the quickest way to success for our business is to really keep our head down, focus on what we're doing, build out the program, build up the systems and the processes, and keep as much knowledge, as much intellectual knowledge in-house as possible. So we partner, but we don't outsource as much as we can. And I think that's the way to success. Now, the last question about what do we outsource? So anything that is very hardware intensive, we do not do in-house. With the exception of the giant inflatables that you see in some of our videos. So for those, it's really a personal, I like to call it a very expensive hobby of mine. We design these 3D inflatables, we get them manufactured in China, and we're the only ones with these designs, and just simply because I like them. But they've turned out to be, I do like them. Yeah. So I designed them on paper, and we have in-house 3D designers. They then sort of do up the 3D model. I flew to Guangzhou with my wife to search for a factory who could properly manufacture this, and now we work with that factory very closely. But with the exception of these giant inflatables, anything else that involves a lot of hardware, for example, speakers, lights, stage, backdrops, these things, we outsource. So we work with contractors, we work with partners, we work with the AV companies, and we have them sort of set it up based on our specifications. But internally, we would still need to have the knowledge, at least, on what are the type of specifications that we want, and then we place the order. So our contractor or our AV company partner simply turns up at the event. They set it up based on our specifications, and then they leave. Then we'll have somebody else come in. So we have a professional DJ, a professional sound engineer, a light engineer. So these people we work with. So what our in-house people do, our event managers or event coordinators do in-house, is they coordinate these people. We know who we want to work with. We know the types of people that we need to work with. We engage them. We tell them what their job roles are, and then we sort of put everything together. That's what we primarily do.
So several students again raised their hands. If you guys have questions, unmute your microphones and ask them. And meanwhile, there was one interesting question that I missed. The events that you organize, what percentage of them are repeat customers?
So we have repeat. We haven't specifically looked at a number, but I want to say in Singapore, maybe 20 to 30% are repeat customers. So if they use this for their family day, they would probably 20 or 30% will book us for their team building, vice versa. Personally, I think the figure is a little bit low for a regular business, but I think it is relatively high for the corporate events business that we're in. The reason is because I don't know if it's a Singaporean culture where you always think that if you go to a new company, you get new ideas, you get better things. So there is this misconception by a lot of corporates in Singapore, and maybe around the world, I'm not sure yet, but there's certainly in Singapore, that in order for them to get a different team building experience, they would much rather work with a different team building company, as opposed to go back to the same company and say, hey, could you organize something different for me? So it's not a matter, it's more a matter of preference and choice, really. So we like to increase that numbers, which is why if we are able to sort of productize our services and give more choices to our clients upfront with full transparency, then that would increase our repeat business, because then they would not have to go to anywhere else if we are able to offer a larger suite of programs and a larger suite of products.
I have a question. It's Juliet Dunfront.
Go ahead, please.
If you have, I'm calling from Chicago, Illinois, in the United States. And
Nice.
if you plan on coming to the United States, would you have internships available? I've worked different events here for different companies and have had extensive experience, but I'm interested in just knowing any thoughts on expanding to the United States and how you would hire talent.
Okay, so the answer is yes, we would most certainly be very interested in expanding to the US. And the question about talents is, yeah, of course, we'll be open to hiring interns and less experienced staff if and when we do expand to the US. Typically, if we were planning for expansion into a new city, the first few full-time and experienced employees that we'll need to hire would primarily be someone who has a lot of experience in corporate events before. So let's call him the head of operations in this new city. And then we would then hire an accounts manager who has experience in managing corporate accounts, doing B2B sales. So those are the two key people that we'll definitely need to hire when we expand to a new city. Below these two senior roles, we can very, very easily work with a team of interns, a team of less experienced staff who have got a lot of interest in events, simply because we've spent so much time building our processes in Singapore that as long as we have at least a senior sales person and a senior operations person, we'll be able, just the both of them, we'll be able to build up a team. And we found I've very pleasantly discovered recently that if we hired interns and with these processes in place, I found that a lot of these interns that's working in our offices in Singapore today actually produce a lot more than what a full-time experienced staff would if you didn't have the processes that we have put in place today.
Can we talk about that some more? And Gordon, maybe you can also chime in, but also Julia's question and Felix's answer here. So in the past, we had situations where our students sort of impressed the companies so much that the companies asked them, would you like to be our representative in your market? And in most of the cases, we're talking here about MBA students or senior undergraduate students that often already had some experience, and they literally just, brought some contracts, and the company said, hey, maybe you should actually open an office there and be our representative. But so the question I have, one, what would it take, Felix, like for example, for someone like Julia, or Julia hypothetically, in the United States, or maybe some other country, maybe closer to Singapore. So what a student would need to do or say or show where you would say, hey, would you like maybe to work for us? Maybe, I don't know, we'll send some senior people there and you will work as a local employee, or maybe even you will be our lead employee there. Like, would you be even open to that idea? And if so, what should come together? What should sort of click and work in order for that to be viable? And then for Gordon, the question I have, Gordon, do you even think it would be kind of feasible to kind of promote that idea more broadly with other clients as well? Or is it too far-fetched and unworkable at all? I'm just curious. Because we seem to have enough students who, on the one hand, have strong interest. On the other hand, like Julia here said she did something similar for another company. And then obviously we have students like literally in dozens and dozens of countries in a given semester. I mean, it seems to me like it might be something that can benefit both parties. Like, can it work at all?
So Felix, I'll let you go
Gordon,
first.
Would you like to take that? Oh, me? Okay. Okay. So I'll go first. Yeah. I think Vas, to answer the question of specifically, yes, of course we will be open to working with your students if any of them have any interest in working with us in their home country or in the country of their residence at this moment. What would it take for us to decide if we were to work with a specific individual? I think it's going to take more than the 1 minute that I'm using to answer this question. But I think that having experience in this business helps a lot. So they don't necessarily need to have experience in running this business or this type of business, but having worked in this type of business, whether in the sales or the operations capacity, I think that would certainly help a lot and be very attractive. When we ask interview questions, whether with potential partners or with our interns or new hires, we tend to ask very practical questions. For example, if Juliana was interested in being our partner in Chicago, the first question that I would be very interested to ask her is, who does she think our competitors are in Chicago? And then we would decide from her answers if we would partner with her. The reason is because if she is able to correctly point out who our competitors are and potentially could be, she would have already designed our entire business plan for Chicago in her head, just simply by doing that research properly. Obviously, with the experience that I have, I could quite quickly do it online, just off the cuff research. But if Juliana's answer would be similar to what I have in mind, then we would take the next steps in exploring. I think it's very easy to say, oh, if the student can bring us potential clients or has contacts to certain companies, then that would be the obvious answer to the students that we will work with. I think that's quite dense in my humble opinion, because again, I think sales is really not the most difficult part of this business. I think the most difficult part of this business is really deciding on how you want to sort of design and run it, and we don't want to. Neither of us want to be organizing and running an event till we're 70. We need to be able to build a business that again can be productized, that as much as possible, as much as practical. It needs to be a business that can be scalable. And in order to build a business like that, we need to look internally at our process, as opposed to keep looking around to see who can be our next customer. And I'm not saying we don't hustle. We hustle quite a bit here in Singapore even. But I've also shared in our X-Culture document that we spend almost no money on marketing. We get recommendations through word of mouth. We get recommendations from one committee within company A to another new committee within the same company. We get people searching for what we offer online on Google. So we get a lot of business through SEO. So I'm not too worried about sales and cold calling and contacts. And I think that's it's good to have, but it's not the most important thing. So I would say, if a student is able to properly understand how our business can be run or should be run in the city of their choice, by being able to correctly identify competitors, I think that would be a good start for us. Gordon?
Yeah, I sort of feel that that's one of the value propositions of X-Culture is it's not only about global virtual teaming. That's the core thing. Now, Felix isn't going to actually key in on anyone unless the client report comes in with some substance, introduces some ideas, and Felix will be going, oh, this is pretty switched on. I like this report. This market makes sense. He's going to have to prioritize markets. He can't do 40 countries a year. He'll probably have to pick, a couple countries per year. But if you're in that set where you have a good report, it's lots of opportunity. He's switched on, want to go there. And where am I going to find people? Because he's not in that country. So an obvious source on, does any of these students actually seem interested and have capability? So I think it's probably a good source of potential leaders and participants for Felix businesses, but you got to prove yourself first.
Yeah, I will only say that we've had many cases, not hundreds, more like dozens over the years, but still quite a few cases where either the report was so good that the client would read it and then calls me and says, can I get the names and contacts of those people? I really want to talk to them. I like the ideas and I want to explore it further, and maybe they want to work for me. We've had cases also, like, for example, some companies hired quite a few people. In fact, there was this company for CER Consulting. They hired 6-7 people per semester, and they participated like 4 semesters in a row. So they just needed people. They would hire them. They looked at the reports. As their owner said, when I hire people the usual way, I can only do like the resume, maybe half an hour interview. Here I have the records of their performance for like half a year, plus I see the report, plus I see peer evaluations. So obviously, that's a much better way to hire. We had also cases like, for example, Hard Rock International was the host of the 2017 X-Culture Symposium in Miami. And so they liked some students so much that they offered them jobs. And also in Miami, DHL was one of the clients, and they actually were so interested in our students that they even sent one of the executives specifically to do some hiring, and several people actually ended up getting jobs. And I think somewhere on our YouTube channel, we even have a video made by one of the students like a year later. I didn't even know that she got the job with DHL at that meeting, but then she was kind of, recapping her experience and said, yeah, I went to the event, I impressed them enough, they gave me the job, and now it's been like a year. So thank you, X-Culture, but also let me tell you more about my experience. So that happened, but also we had a few cases where companies were specializing in businesses that students understood. There was this company that does like plagiarism detection with the universities. We had also companies that work with schools and educational toys and things like that. There was also big like 5D gaming machines from India. And so students literally just developed the strategy. And in some cases they said, I know enough people in this country to be able to represent you, or vice versa. I interviewed a few university, college deans, and so this is what they told me. And I think I can actually do this job for you here in this region. And they said, sure, why don't you try it? Here are some resources for you to start with, and let's see how it works. And it seems like in some cases, again, it's not like half of the students get the jobs, but there are always a few cases every semester when it did work out. So I don't know how it's going to go with the Get Out events, but we have enough companies that potentially might be interested in your services, collaboration, and partnership. But we have a bunch of questions here. I see from Maya, from Juliana, about marketing. So you said it's mainly word of mouth, but you still do some advertising, don't you? So how do you promote your services?
Yeah, so word of mouth is one way. Another way is really organic marketing. So we do a lot of search engine optimization. We focus on creating a lot of content, text content, video content on our website. And hopefully that helps us rank well. It's been doing very well for us in Singapore so far in the last few years. So obviously, since that works, we just keep pumping up more content, which is why you see a lot of videos and a lot of information about the type of programs and the services that we offer on our website versus our very direct competitors in Singapore. A lot of competitors, and maybe it's a very Asian or a very Singaporean mentality where, we tend not to share information. We tend to keep a lot of information within our own company for fear of our competitors learning about what we do. The contrary, what we do at Get Out events is we've seen a lot of benefits in sharing this information online, because then Google sees us as an authority, and Google then directs traffic from the search engines to our website. So that's how we primarily market ourselves. We just do more events, run more programs, come up with new ideas, share them on our website, put up a video, and keep doing more search engine optimization in order for us to get new leads for our business. We found this to be more effective. So we also spend a little bit of money on Google Ads and a little bit of money, say, I don't know, like $500 a month or something on Facebook Ads, and another $500 or $1,000 a month on Google AdWords. But this is really those form of advertising or marketing. It doesn't actually get us any leads or any clients. To be very honest, 100% of our inquiries have all come through either word of mouth or from people searching for a family day event company based in Singapore. It's all organic. They've not come through because they've seen a Google ad and then they sort of inquire. That's almost never happened. But we still do that because we don't want to be out of sight and then out of mind. So we still buy and purchase Facebook ads for Singapore. We purchase Google ads for Singapore. So at least when someone searches for team building or family days or dinner and dance, our brand still pops up. That's the only reason we do that. We don't do it for leads at all. So truth to heart, the best way, the most effective marketing that we've ever done is really to just keep putting on more content on our site as much as we reasonably can.
Yeah, I would say with Felix, and the students understand, he's pretty social media savvy. So just saying, the marketing channel to use social media, he's already there. Of course, in different markets, it's the positioning of that social media could help. But I found him on social, he has a great website. I was looking at who could do the Heritage Day to help the students at the symposium understand what Singapore is about while having fun. And that's how I connected with him. So it's an easy medium, and it's a professional looking website. And you can see that with your background video as you're going.
Felix, would you be willing to share some information about the pricing, both the level of price and how much an event like this costs, but more importantly, how is the price determined? Is it some sort of like a fixed price per person, or is it negotiated each time separately? How does it work when in an industry like this?
Okay, so 7 years ago, when I first, 8 years ago, when I first got into this industry, at least in Singapore, so I can't speak for other countries, but in Singapore, our competitors used to, and they still do, price these events based on a per head cost. So for example, they would say a team building would cost $50 per head if you gave them 100 people. A family day would cost, I don't know, $100 per head if you gave them 500 people. A dinner and dance would cost $200 per head if you give them 1,000 people, for instance. I started off this business pricing ourselves this way and pitching the same way to our prospects. But I found that to be an extremely ineffective way of pricing. For two reasons. One is you tend to get a lot of changes back and forth from the client. So for example, if I were, let's say if I were charging SMU for the heritage race or the heritage hunt at the end of this year, and I said, okay, Gordon, if you gave me 400 students, I'll charge you $100 per head. Gordon would come back and say, what if it's 390 students? How much would you charge me then? Yeah. So that conversation just frustrates me so much because it just never ends. It's 390. And then what if it's 395? What if I exceeded by 10 people? And it just never ends. And in the business of sales or in standard sales practices, you really want the conversation to end as soon as possible. Yeah. So either he buys or he doesn't. You just don't want him to be having this kind of conversation with you for the next 6 to 8 weeks. So we've changed the way we sell. We offer our services, the way we price our services in the last year. Actually, we started January 2019, and the way we do it is in a very transparent way. So for example, let's say for the Accenture event that we've organized, in this video in my background here, typically you would charge, let's say, $300 Singapore dollars per head for this event if it's for 3,000 people. And you'd say, you're right, and then Accenture would say, why am I paying this amount of money? Where is that money going to? Yeah. Then what we would then have to do is we sort of have to break it down to say, okay, we're going to be spending $60,000 on lights and sound. We're going to be spending 150 grand on food and drinks. We're going to be spending this amount of money on these line items, which is true. So I've learned from our tests in January 2019 that if we actually built our event based on very specific line items, so light, stage, singers, performers, food, these are the things that we need to put an event together. And then these are the respective costs that we would incur. Then we agree internally, or at least it's a directive internally that I give to my team, that for anything that we need to outsource, we would put a very small markup, maybe 5% or 7% markup on our cost. Yeah? And things that we own ourselves. So for example, we own the inflatables, and we need to sort of depreciate the inflatables because they are not cheap. So then we would put in a depreciation cost to that, and then mark up on our depreciation cost. So basically, it's always cost plus the way that we do things. Yeah, and once we're done, once we get to the end of this budget sheet, there is this final line item which we call professional services. So very much like how consultants used to charge, or probably still charge, I don't know. So we charge PS, we charge professional services, and the way we price it in Singapore, and I think this is very market dependent, but the way we price it in Singapore is we charge between $2,500 to $3,000 a month for a month of work. So now let's say it's February 1st today, and the client has an event 2 months from today. we think that we are probably going to be spending quite a bit of back and forth time with this client for the next 2 months. Our PS will range between $5,000 to $6,000. Yeah. And we do have clients who book us a year in advance. That would be 12 months of work. So it'll be 12 times, I don't know, $3,000. So our professional services fees would be $36,000, simply because we have to service this client for 12 months. And we found that this quite interestingly helped us grow our business. It helped us win a lot of very large 6-figure event deals. Because clients like the way we price and we charge them, simply because we are very transparent. When we say, look, the stage costs $1,000 and we're charging you $1,050, yeah, because for the trouble, right? And so the client likes it. They like that we're very transparent with them. It's very good for our bottom line as well. Because sometimes, especially for larger events, a client may say, okay, Felix, I really don't want the inflatables. They look really nice, but we don't want them. We've got somebody else from a different company who's giving us some carnival games and carnival rides. So please remove all your inflatables from your quote. Before we switched to a cost plus model and then primarily earning from our professional services, we would flip at that demand, at that request, simply because we would have probably put a 50 to 60% markup on our inflatables. And if the client says remove the inflatables from the quote, we're screwed basically. We've lost at least $15,000 to $20,000 in potential gross profit. But today, if the client says remove the inflatables, we remove the inflatables. We're okay. Because we lose maybe $2,000 in gross profit, because our true value, our true fees are very clearly stated as professional services fees. When we charge this way,
make money on the professional service and not
yes.
on, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Plus it gives the client kind of an opportunity to do some calculations, and they can think, well, I can do it myself. I probably will not save any money on food or anything else, because there is still a price to that. But do I want to go through the hassle of organizing it myself, or will I pay? Actually, that makes perfect sense.
Yes, and this way of pricing also helps us in a lot of ways. Competitively, a client is unable to compare now apples to apples. So they can't say event company A charges $100 per head, Get Out Events is charging $150 per head, therefore they're 50% more expensive. They can't compare us to our competitors this way anymore, because we do not quote per head. To us, if you had 3,000 people or 2,900 people, it's exactly the same price. Yeah, because you have one stage, you have one sound system package, you have X number of food stalls. Your costs are all fixed. So we sort of, instead of charging them a variable fee based on a per head price, we charge them this way. They are now not able to compare us to our competitors. So they can't say that we're expensive, because no one charges this way. Most event companies tend to either give a large package price and they say, okay, this event is $500,000, or they say this event is $500 per head. Very few event companies are so transparent with their pricing. Another advantage that we found internally by charging a $25,000 or $36,000 professional services fee is that it keeps our team committed to creating more value for our client, right? Because then I go to my team and I say, guys, this client is effectively paying your salary for the next 12 months. All you need to do is get on a webinar or get on a conference call once a week. Can't you at least just do that professionally? So then it puts things in context, and then instead of us just simply being middlemen with event service providers, we become more professional. Gordon doesn't like it when I say we become more like consultants, but we are becoming a lot more like consultants, but we justify the value. So as you said, rightfully, the client will then decide, do they work with Get Out Events or do they work with me and my team, or do they do it by themselves? They're free to do it by themselves, of course. But you do not get this conversation that you and I are having now. You do not get the ideas that we have in our head. You do not get the guarantee that we have from our portfolio, having organized thousands of events. So that's what you're really paying money for. And if you think paying me and my team $30,000 for a year of work is expensive, then I really suggest you look somewhere else. Yeah. So that's how we price ourselves now.
There is actually a question from Barbara Payne from Washington, D.C. How else do you differentiate yourself from competition? So pricing, that's a clear differentiation. Anything else that you think makes you different?
I've explored and looked at a lot of US-based event companies, and I have friends and connections on LinkedIn who are event professionals in the States as well. One thing that I've sort of come to a conclusion is that a lot of event companies in the US tend to do a lot of many different types of events. I would say our key differentiating factor versus, let's say, a corporate events company in Washington, D.C. is we focus on, our offerings are very, very focused. We're very niche compared to the other corporate event planners in D.C. For example, a corporate event planner in Washington, D.C. would organize team building. He would also do a charity fundraiser. He would also organize a marathon and a gala dinner. And that's what they would do. And they would call themselves a corporate event planner. For Get Out Events, if we do set ourselves up in Washington, D.C., we would organize team building, family days, dinner and dance / gala dinners. We would not organize marathons. We don't do charity fundraisers. We don't organize conferences. We focus on these three things. And you know, I think every event company offers a different experience to their clients from the very first day that a contract is signed till the day that the event is run. And I would like to think that we offer a different experience. We offer more personal experience. But again, every one of our competitors would say that. So I think what's very, very practical, what's very solid to say in terms of difference is we are really very focused on what we are doing. That also means that we spend a lot more time doing research on these type of events. So if a client in Washington, D.C. needs a company to organize a family day for them, they would probably get more value by working with Get Out Events versus working with our competitors, simply because we do a lot of family days. We know what's out there. We know what's fun. We know what attracts your staff, your colleagues, versus a guy who also does charity fundraisers and gala dinners.
Officially, we're out of time. We try to keep these events to 1 hour. You're busy, so your day is about to start. We don't want to take up too much of your time, but we still have a few questions. Maybe we can do them as a blitz, very short answers. Okay. So there is a question from Juliana. When you do, or for your overseas operations, do you have local employees there, or it's all managed by people from Singapore?
If we do expand internationally, we would, again, I think I addressed this earlier to Julia from Chicago. We would hire at least primarily 2 full-time staff locally. We will trip in, myself personally, obviously, to that city as the business grows, but primarily not to do sales for the business, but primarily to build that business. So we would work with both. We would send local staff to that city and also hire staff locally in that city.
Okay. From Anna Lastra, a question about Latin America. Would you consider doing business in Latin America?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I wouldn't see why not, for sure.
As far as it gets. Of course, yeah. Another question, seasonals. Is your business seasonal, within a week, within a year? Are there any systemic fluctuations?
Is it seasonal? I don't know. So we don't run events every day. But we plan events every day. So I would say it's not seasonal, simply because we are just very busy every day. We are either planning for an upcoming event or we are literally running an event today. So today the entire team's in the office, but they're planning for a very large 4,000 people event for Pratt & Whitney, an American airline engine company firm. So doing that in May. We've thankfully just won the contract from them to organize the 95th anniversary for the Singapore offices. So right now we're very busy towards the month of April and May. So I wouldn't say it's seasonal. I think you're busy every day.
Okay. And then there were a few questions about your personal background and business experience, but they basically boil down to, if I wanted to start my own business, any tips, any advice? Or as somebody put, if you could go back in time, would you do anything differently to prepare you for managing this business?
Yeah, if I could go back in time, I would invest in technology much earlier. Right now, we have hired, I think since we've submitted the document for XCulture, we've hired 4 full-time developers, web and app developers on our payroll. We're developing, I shared a few snippets of the technology that we're developing for in-house use and also for the industry use. If I could go back in time, I would.
You mean IT, or you mean like the bouncing castles technology?
Like IT. So we've moved away from using Google Sheets to create event budgets. We have created our own event builder tool that says, okay, if a company comes in and he's got a $50,000 budget for a family day, these are the templates that we can use internally. These are all the suppliers. Our guys in the office can simply drag and drop and create a budget and send a proposal on the same day. Whereas in the past, we needed at least a week or a week and a half to generate something like that. So we have that tool now internally. With also the platform for event jobs. We're going to be launching that very, very soon. And there are a few more ideas in the pipeline that we're developing as well. If I could turn back time, I would have not hesitated in investing in this IT technology sooner. I would have done that way, way, way sooner. But never late, better late than never, as they say.
Yeah. And the final question that probably we should have started with: what is the form of ownership of your company? Are you the sole owner, or do you have a board of directors or any other partners?
It would be me and my wife, who is my real boss. And they can find out more about who we are.
Not a public company. You don't have to answer to anyone. You basically can make all of the decisions, right?
Yes. We don't answer to anyone except to each other. So we're sort of like a couplepreneur, as they call it now. We intend to keep it this way. We intend to keep the business private. We intend to have very strategic partners in different cities or different countries. Hopefully, some of them could potentially be your students if they are the right ones. So that's where we are.
Yeah, I think I've gone through all of the questions. Gordon, did I miss anything, or?
Yeah, I just want to guide the students. There's been quite a number of questions about what would you do, Felix? What would you do, Felix? I think the students need to put themselves in Felix's shoes. Right. You're running the business now. You understand the core competencies of Felix, what his offerings are. Yeah, you may need some clarity. But if you were him, what would you do? And don't bias it according to what country you're based in. Think about what would you do in terms of, if you go to another country, there's no way you're going to actually just say hi to everybody. You're going to have to transfer knowledge. That's what we learn a bit in the course. You need to transfer the knowledge. So he probably, at least initially or whatever, will have to transfer someone there or bring someone from that foreign market to his operation in Singapore, train him up so he had confidence that he had a manager to execute. So it's not a theoretical exercise.
Right.
You're in his shoes. You have your own hundreds of thousands, your future employment at risk. What would you do if you were in his shoes?
That's precisely the intent. And I think that's how it works best, right? Well, thank you, gentlemen. So I guess for you in Singapore, have a nice day. It's what, 11 a.m., right? So you have the whole day ahead of you. It's 10 p.m. or later in the United States, depending on the time zone. And then Europe probably is way too late. Thank you so much, and we'll see, maybe we'll organize another webinar further down in the semester when students have some ideas and maybe some need some feedback. But meanwhile, students, if you have any questions that we either didn't answer or you have some questions tomorrow, just email them to us. We will forward them to the company, and then hopefully we'll get the answer soon and forward it back to you. So thank you so much.
So that's email. What's the email address for
admin@excculture.org. So Simone keeps track of all of the questions. Many of them are repetitive, so there is no need to bother busy CEOs every time the same question is asked again or second time. But if it's a new question, we will contact the company, get the answer, send it to you, and then add it to the catalog of the frequently asked questions. So admin@excculture.org. So anytime, email us. We'll usually get back to you within a couple of days. All right, well, thank you so much, and yeah, we will be in touch then. Thank you. And thank you so much, Gordon, for organizing this meeting, for putting us together and being here with us. So yeah,
thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Felix.
Thanks, guys.
And happy Chinese New Year, right? So.
And you. Thanks, Bas.